The words, "That is what you deserve," did not echo in the room. They echoed inside me. My name is Vivian Cole. I am 58 years old. And this is the story I tried to bury in silence, until silence nearly destroyed me. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and expensive smiles. Golden fabric draped every wall. Soft jazz floated through the air as if nothing in the world could go wrong inside a room this beautiful. It was my son Elliot's wedding night. My only child. The boy I raised with 2 jobs, sleepless nights, and prayers whispered into the dark. I sat at the family table wearing an ivory silk gown I had saved 3 years to buy. My hands trembled slightly as I folded them in my lap. I told myself it was pride. A mother's pride. I was wrong. Across from me sat Margaret Hale, my son's new mother-in-law. A woman dressed in blood-red satin, diamonds heavy around her neck, eyes sharp like knives wrapped in silk. From the moment we met months earlier, she never tried to hide her dislike for me. I was too quiet, too simple. Not their kind. Still I smiled, because mothers learn to swallow pain quietly. Dinner was served. Laughter rose. Glasses clinked. Then suddenly heat. Boiling. Violent. Unforgiving. Before my mind could understand, a bowl of steaming gumbo crashed into my face. The burn was instant. My skin screamed. Spices flooded my eyes. Thick broth soaked my hair, my dress, my dignity. Gasps filled the air, and then silence. I heard Margaret's chair scrape back as she stood. Her lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile. "That," she said calmly, "is what you deserve." No one moved. No one spoke. I searched the room for one face. My son. Elliot sat there, arms crossed, eyes cold. Detached. Like I was a stranger. "She's right, Mom," he said. His voice steady. Final. Something inside me broke so cleanly it didn't even hurt at first. I did not scream. I did not cry. I took the linen napkin from my lap and wiped my face slowly. Deliberately. I stood up straight, even as my legs shook. But before I left that ballroom, before I disappeared into the night, I reached into my clutch, and I dialed a number no one there expected me to have. I did not remember the drive home. Later, when I tried to recall how I made it from the glowing ballroom to my small, quiet house on the edge of town, my mind returned nothing but fragments. Red traffic lights, the hum of the engine, the smell of spices still clinging to my skin. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but inside, something was unraveling thread by thread. When I finally closed the front door behind me, the silence hit harder than the humiliation. I leaned my back against the door and slid down slowly until I was sitting on the cold wooden floor. My dress was ruined, my hair stiff with dried broth. My face throbbed, but I barely noticed the pain. Physical pain had rules. It came, it peaked, it faded. This was something else. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, until the house clock ticked loudly enough to pull me back into myself. Midnight. My son was probably still celebrating. Laughing. Dancing. Free. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. Under the harsh white light, I finally looked at myself. The woman in the mirror startled me. Not because she was burned or stained, but because she looked old in a way I had never allowed myself to see before. Not just in years, but in weight. In exhaustion. In the way her shoulders curved inward, as if she had spent decades making herself smaller so others could feel bigger. I turned on the shower and let the water run until steam filled the room. As the heat washed over my skin, memories came with it. Uninvited. Unstoppable. I had not always been this woman. Once, I was Vivian Cole, not Elliot's mother, not someone's inconvenience, not a quiet figure in the background. I had been sharp. Ambitious. Alive. At 22, I had graduated at the top of my class in finance. Professors told me I had instincts you couldn't teach. A mind that saw patterns others missed. I believed them. I believed in myself back then. Then I met Richard Cole. He was charming in the way men are when they want something from you. Confident. Attentive. He said he admired my intelligence. He said I scared him in a good way. We married quickly. Too quickly. And when I became pregnant with Elliot, everything changed. Richard didn't leave all at once. He disappeared slowly, missed dinners, forgotten promises, long nights that required no explanation. When Elliot was 3, Richard walked out with a suitcase and a woman who wore my perfume better than I ever had. No apology. No goodbye to his son. Just absence. I remembered standing in the doorway that night, holding Elliot on my hip while he cried for a father who was already gone. I promised him something then. A vow whispered into his hair. I'll give you everything, I said. Even if it costs me myself. And it did. I took jobs beneath my education because they were stable. Predictable. I turned down promotions that required travel. I stopped dressing like a woman who wanted to be seen, and started dressing like someone who wanted to disappear quietly after work. Every choice revolved around my son. When Elliot wanted piano lessons, I sold my grandmother's ring. When he wanted to attend a private school, I took a second job at night. When he struggled, I softened the world for him, again and again. I told myself this was love. But love unchecked can become erasure. By the time Elliot was grown, I was no longer sure who I was without him. My dreams had been folded neatly away, like clothes saved for a season that never came. And then came Lydia, my son's fiancée. She was beautiful in a fragile, curated way. Soft voice. Perfect posture. Her family was everything mine wasn't. Wealthy, connected, loud with confidence. Her mother, Margaret, had looked at me the first time we met as if I were a stain she couldn't remove from the fabric of her new life. She raised him alone? Margaret had asked Lydia, not even bothering to lower her voice. I smiled then. I always smiled. I didn't realize those smiles were teaching my son something dangerous, that I would accept anything, as long as he stayed. The shower water cooled, and I turned it off, wrapping myself in a towel. As I stepped out, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message. Not from Elliot. Not from anyone at the wedding. It was from Daniel Mercer. I heard something happened tonight. Are you safe? My fingers froze above the screen. Daniel Mercer was not a name anyone at that wedding would have associated with me. He belonged to a chapter of my life no one knew about. A chapter one had closed carefully and locked away. I hadn't spoken to him in years. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the message until another memory surfaced, one I hadn't allowed myself to touch in a very long time. Years ago, before I became invisible, Daniel had offered me a choice. Come work with me, he'd said. Not for the money. For yourself. I had said no. Because I was a mother first. I looked at my reflection again. Hair still damp, face bare, eyes clearer than they had been in months. For the first time since the ballroom, something inside me didn't hurt. It shifted. I typed a single reply. I'm safe. And I think it's time we talked. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. They thought the story ended when I walked out of that wedding. They were wrong. That night was not my ending. It was the moment I finally stopped disappearing. The morning light was unforgiving. It spilled through the thin curtains and landed directly on my face, as if the day itself refused to give me time to recover. My skin still burned faintly where the hot gumbo had struck me, but the deeper ache sat somewhere behind my ribs, heavy, unmoving. I had slept for less than 2 hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elliot's face. Not angry, not confused, just firm, certain, as if siding against me had been the most natural decision in the world. I rose slowly and walked into the kitchen. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old books, familiar, safe. This was the home Elliot grew up in. The table where he did his homework. The counter where he stood on tiptoes to steal cookies while I pretended not to notice. I made coffee out of habit, not desire. As it brewed, my phone buzzed again. This time it was him. Elliot. We need to talk. No apology. No question if I was okay. Just a statement. A summons. I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar instinct to rush in. The one that told me to fix things, smooth edges, protect him from discomfort. It didn't come. Instead, a quiet thought settled in my mind. No. We don't need to talk. You need to explain. Still, I typed back. Me. Come by this afternoon. His reply was instant. Elliot. Fine. 2 p.m. As if he were scheduling a meeting with a colleague. I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around the warm mug. My reflection in the microwave door looked steadier than I felt. Older, yes, But there was something new there, a sharpness that hadn't existed yesterday. At exactly 2 o'clock, his car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as he stepped out. Tailored suit. Expensive watch. The same posture his father used to have. Confident, entitled, already convinced he was right. That realization stung more than I expected. He didn't knock. He never did. He let himself in like he always had. "Mom," he said, standing just inside the doorway. I didn't rush to hug him. I didn't ask if he was tired. I gestured to the chair across from me and stayed seated. "Sit," I said. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Barely noticeable, but enough. Then he sat. Silence stretched between us. Finally he spoke. "Last night got out of hand." I waited. "You embarrassed Lydia's family," he continued. "You know how important first impressions are." I set my coffee down carefully. "You watched someone throw boiling food in my face," I said calmly. "And you agreed with her." His jaw tightened. "She shouldn't have done it. But you provoked her." That word landed hard. "Provoked," I repeated. "By existing?" "You're always playing the victim," he snapped. "Margaret was upset because you've been undermining Lydia since the engagement." I let out a slow breath. "Give me one example." He opened his mouth then closed it. "I knew it," I said quietly. "You can't." His eyes flickered with irritation. "You never fit into their world, Mom. You don't understand how things work at that level." There it was. Not anger. Not misunderstanding. Shame. "You're ashamed of me," I said. "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant." He stood abruptly. "You don't get it. Lydia's family has connections. Power. They can help my career in ways you never could." The sentence echoed in the room, ugly and exposed. I studied the man in front of me, tall, successful, polished, and tried to locate the boy who used to cling to my leg on his first day of school. "When did I become something you needed to outgrow?" I asked. He looked away. "Margaret thinks you're manipulative," he said. "She thinks you use your sacrifices to control me." I smiled then. A small, sad smile. "She's wrong," I said. "I never controlled you. I erased myself for you." He scoffed. "You chose that." "Yes," I said. "And you benefited from it." Silence again. This time he broke it. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Apologize? That won't fix anything." "No," I said. "It won't." He looked surprised. "I don't want an apology," I continued. "I want you to understand what you did." "I chose my wife," he said defensively. "No," I corrected him. "You chose approval. And you chose it over your own mother's dignity." His face hardened. "If you can't accept my family, then maybe it's best we keep some distance." The old me would have begged. The old me would have promised to be quieter, smaller, easier. Instead, I nodded. "Maybe it is," I said. That startled him. "You're okay with that?" he asked. "I'm not okay," I replied. "But I'm done sacrificing myself to earn a place in your life." He stood there unsure now. Unsteady. "Mom," he said softer. "You're overreacting." I stood too, meeting his eyes evenly. "No," I said. "I'm finally reacting appropriately." He left shortly after that. No hook. No backward glance. When the door closed, the house felt larger. Emptier. But not lonelier. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up my phone. Another message from Daniel Mercer waited on the screen. "I can meet today. Same place as before." I typed back without hesitation. "I'll be there." As I grabbed my coat, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. I had spent decades teaching my son how to stand tall in the world. Now I would teach myself. And whether he followed me back into my life or not, this time, I would not kneel to keep him. The cafe hadn't changed. It sat on the corner of 5th and Monroe, tucked between a bookstore and an old law office. Its brick walls softened by ivy that refused to die even in winter. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee beans and polished wood. A scent that once belonged to a version of me I barely recognized now. I paused outside the glass door, my hand hovering over the handle. For years, I had avoided this place on purpose. Not because it held bad memories, but because it held possibility. And possibility had been dangerous back when my life revolved around survival. I stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. Conversations murmured around me. At the far table near the window sat Daniel Mercer. Time had touched him, but gently. His hair was threaded with silver now, his face lined in a way that spoke of responsibility rather than regret. He stood the moment he saw me, his expression unreadable for a heartbeat, then warm. "Vivian," he said. Hearing my name like that, not Mom, not Mrs. Cole, felt like reclaiming something stolen. "Daniel," I replied, taking the seat across from him. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. "You look," he began, then stopped. "Different." "So do you," I said. A smile flickered between us. Not romantic, not nostalgic, respectful. Careful. "I heard about the wedding," he said quietly. "Not details. Just enough." "It was educational," I replied. He nodded. "I figured you didn't call to talk about coffee." "No," I said. "I called because I'm done pretending I don't exist." That earned a sharp look of interest. "Tell me what you want, Vivian." I took a breath. "I want to know why you offered me that job all those years ago. And I want to know why you never tried again." Daniel leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "Because you said no," he answered simply. "And because you weren't ready." I frowned. "Ready for what?" "For the truth," he said. The word hung between us. "You weren't just talented," he continued. "You were rare. You saw financial movements before they happened. You had instincts that people spend lifetimes trying to buy." I looked down at my hands. "Instincts don't matter if you don't use them." "No," he said gently. "They wait." I looked up. "You built Mercer Holdings from nothing," I said. "Everyone knows that. Why involve me?" His eyes sharpened. "Because you helped build it." My breath caught. "I was a silent partner," he continued. "Legally protected. You helped design the early investment strategies. You walked away before the first big expansion." Memory rushed back. Late nights reviewing numbers, patterns forming in my mind like constellations. I had told myself it was just helping a friend. "You kept my name off everything," I said. "Because you asked me to," he replied. "You said your son needed stability more than you needed recognition." I swallowed. "And now?" I asked. "Now," he said slowly, "your shares are worth more than most people in that wedding hall will make in a lifetime." The room seemed to tilt. I laughed once, soft, incredulous. "My son called me useless yesterday." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He has no idea who you are." "No," I agreed. "He doesn't." The waitress arrived, breaking the tension. We ordered coffee neither of us touched. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because you called," he said. "And because something tells me you're done being invisible." I sat back, letting the truth settle into my bones. I wasn't poor. I wasn't powerless. I had never been small. I had simply chosen silence. What would stepping back into this world look like? I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "It would look like you taking your seat again. Publicly." My pulse quickened. Elliot would find out. "Yes," Daniel said. "And so would Margaret Hale." The name sent a chill through me. "I don't want revenge," I said carefully. "I know," Daniel replied. "You want justice. There's a difference." I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. "All right," I said. "I want to see everything. Accounts. Holdings. Paperwork." A slow smile spread across his face. "I was hoping you'd say that." As we stood to leave, Daniel paused. "One more thing," he said. "Margaret Hale's empire isn't as solid as it looks." I turned to him. "She builds power by crushing people quietly," he continued. "The kind of woman who throws hot soup in public is never clean in private." I thought of her satisfied smile. Of my son's cold agreement. "Good," I said softly. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from who I was. I was walking back toward her. And somewhere across town, people who thought they had erased me were standing on ground far less stable than they realized. The city never sleeps, but that night, Atlanta seemed quieter, almost hesitant. as if it knew something was about to shift. I returned to my apartment after the cafe meeting with Daniel. My stoneware mug sat on the counter, still faintly warm from the morning coffee. I didn't touch it. I had other matters to attend to. Daniel had given me the files, the spreadsheets, the contracts, everything I needed to see the cracks in Margaret Hale's empire. And the cracks were enormous. Margaret had built an empire of wealth and influence, but it was built on fear, deception, and lies. Shell corporations, falsified accounts, offshore assets hidden under layers of trustees and lawyers. All things a casual observer wouldn't notice, but things I could see with a careful eye. I set up my laptop, laying out the documents, cross-referencing each claim with public records. Every false invoice, every bribed official, every fraudulent contract, it was there. And I realized something terrifying. If I exposed this correctly, if I revealed it in the right way, Margaret wouldn't just lose power. She could be ruined, publicly and legally. And the first strike would come tonight. I didn't wait. I made a call. One number. One simple call. A secure line to someone who had been waiting for confirmation. The type of person who didn't ask questions, only executed. Ready, I said simply. Understood. Came the low, clipped reply. I didn't need to say more. That night, I walked through the city streets with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The streetlights illuminated my path, and the cool wind brushed against my face, reminding me that I was alive, that I was finally in control. At exactly 11:23 p.m., the first message went out. A meticulously compiled dossier of Margaret Hale's illegal activities, delivered anonymously to the top media outlets, the authorities, and even her own investors. Within minutes, the dominoes began to fall. Alerts, notifications, emails, phone calls. Her empire began to wobble. Banks froze accounts. Lawyers withdrew. Investors panicked. Social media exploded with speculation and leaks. Margaret, of course, was furious. But she had no idea who had orchestrated this. She only knew the storm had begun. I watched it unfold from my window. The city lights reflecting off the glass, like sparks igniting a long-awaited fire. And then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. They know something's happening, he said, voice calm. But they don't know it's you. Yet. I nodded silently. Good. Let's keep it that way. I leaned back in my chair, my hands trembling slightly from adrenaline and anticipation. For the first time in decades, I felt truly empowered. Not because of wealth, not because of status, but because I had the power to protect what mattered most. Margaret Hale would soon understand the weight of her actions. And so would everyone who had ever thought they could manipulate, humiliate, or underestimate me. Justice had a first strike. And I intended to make every following strike count. The following morning, the city was alive with whispers. The news of Margaret Hale's mystery leak spread like wildfire across social media, financial news channels, and every corner of the city's elite circles. But the most important person hadn't yet realized the full extent of what was coming. Margaret herself. I had already seen the early reactions. Investors panicked. Her personal lawyer had been forced into emergency meetings. The banks were reviewing their accounts and freezing her overseas transfers. Margaret's meticulously crafted facade of power began to tremble. Ever so slightly at first, but the cracks were visible to anyone who knew where to look. I didn't rush her. I knew she would reveal herself on her own, and I was patient. This wasn't a sprint, it was a calculated chess game. By mid-morning, I received the first message from Daniel. They're scrambling. Margaret doesn't know who's behind this yet. Her PR team is in full panic mode. She's hiding meetings with her lawyers. Her daughter is asking questions. A small, satisfied smile curved my lips. Good. Let her crumble. Meanwhile, I spent the day preparing the next phase. I had collected detailed evidence of her network of influence. The bribes, the falsified audits, the shell companies. Each document was like a loaded gun, waiting to be fired in the correct order. I called my first insider. Someone within Margaret's inner circle. Someone who had grown tired of lies and manipulation. The moment they answered, I spoke calmly, deliberately. You know the truth about her empire, don't you? I asked. There was a pause. Then a whisper. Yes. I know enough. But if anyone finds out I told you, I'll protect you. But if you want justice, you need to act now. By evening, the first insider report had been submitted anonymously to the authorities. Margaret's inner circle was already starting to fracture. People were choosing sides. Fear spread faster than loyalty. Margaret, predictably, started to lash out. Her social media posts became erratic. She called emergency board meetings. She grilled her lawyers, demanding answers. She could feel her control slipping. But she didn't know the origin of the storm. That made her desperate and dangerous. I sat in my apartment, my hands wrapped around my stoneware mug, feeling the cool ceramic against my skin. I watched the city lights flicker through my window, thinking about how power always looks so glamorous until it's stripped away. At 9:17 p.m., Daniel's call came. They know it's not internal. Margaret suspects a leak from outside, but she can't pinpoint who. She's panicking, and her daughter is scared. This is perfect. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. For justice, for truth. Margaret Hale's empire, built on lies, arrogance, and cruelty, was beginning to crumble. And I was ready to watch it all fall. Piece by piece, calculated, controlled, without a single misstep. The next morning, the city seemed quieter than usual, but I knew it was only the calm before the storm. Margaret Hale was no ordinary opponent. She was cunning, ruthless, and dangerously unpredictable. The leaks, the whispers, the fractures in her empire were only the first wave. Now the real battle was about to begin. By 8:30 a.m., news outlets were buzzing with rumors about Margaret's companies. Her stock had dropped overnight, and her investors were demanding explanations. But Margaret wasn't panicking yet. She was calculating. Every move she made was precise, every word carefully measured, like a general preparing for war. I watched from my apartment as Daniel updated me. She's mobilizing her lawyers, her PR team, her board. She's planning a counterattack. She's digging for the source of the leak. Good. Let her dig. The more she searched, the more she would expose herself. By noon, she had called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and her voice rang through the room. Controlled, confident, yet with a subtle undertone of menace. My companies are under attack, she declared. Baseless accusations, false claims, and manipulations are attempting to destabilize everything we have built. I assure the public, my investors, and my clients. These claims are unfounded, and we will take immediate action against those responsible. The audience clapped politely, but I could see it through the footage. Uncertainty. The cracks were showing, and Margaret's carefully constructed image was beginning to falter. I spent the afternoon gathering more evidence. Internal emails, financial records, and testimonies from insiders all pointed to her patterns of deceit and abuse. Every piece I collected was a puzzle piece, and soon the full picture would be undeniable. Then came the unexpected twist. Daniel's voice was urgent over the phone. Margaret is retaliating, and she's using someone close to you. My stomach tightened. I had anticipated retaliation, but not through the people I trusted. She's trying to leverage personal connections against you, Daniel continued. We need to move fast. If she finds the wrong leverage, it could delay everything. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Prepare everything. The final phase begins tonight. No mistakes. As evening fell, Margaret's network grew restless. Key allies questioned her decisions, unsure whether to stand by a woman whose empire seemed shakier by the hour. Emails were intercepted, confidential calls leaked, and whispers spread like wildfire. Every action she took to maintain control only exposed more vulnerabilities. By 10 p.m., she had realized the depth of the threat. Margaret Hale, who had once seemed untouchable, was now a cornered lion. Her confidence was slipping. Her empire, her pride, her carefully crafted life, all were unraveling before her eyes. And I, from my small apartment with my stoneware mug in hand, felt the calm satisfaction of someone who knew the storm was theirs to control. But the storm hadn't ended yet. The final moves were coming, and Margaret didn't even know the board was set. The night was restless. Rain tapped against my window, a quiet percussion that mirrored the storm brewing in the city and in my mind. Margaret Hale had realized I wasn't just a nuisance. I was a threat she couldn't ignore. And now she was striking back. Daniel called just before midnight, his voice tense. They've traced some of our leaks back to insiders. Margaret's trying to silence anyone connected to us. People are scared. Some of our allies are pulling out. I didn't flinch. Fear had no place here. Then we make sure they have reason to stay. Prepare backup. Double everything. No one gets intimidated. The next morning, the city woke to chaos. Stock markets wavered. Headlines splashed with questions about Margaret Hale's empire. Cracks in a billion-dollar empire? Margaret Hale under scrutiny. What investors need to know. Margaret's PR team scrambled. Her board was fractured. But she wasn't finished. No, she was more dangerous than ever. By 2 p.m., she had called another emergency meeting. Daniel and I monitored every move through our discreet channels. She's trying to manipulate public perception, Daniel said. She's planning a massive announcement, something shocking. Possibly to regain control. I clenched my fists. Let her announce. Everything she reveals, everything she fabricates, will only make the truth stronger. At 4 p.m., Margaret Hale appeared on live television. Her image was perfect, composed, yet her eyes betrayed tension. My companies are being attacked by an organized campaign of misinformation, she said. False accusations, fabricated evidence. But I assure my clients and partners, the truth will prevail, and those responsible will face consequences. She smiled, sharp and cruel, but it was a defensive smile, not confident. And I knew why. By evening, Daniel's alerts were nonstop. Margaret's legal maneuvers were aggressive. She tried to freeze our assets, threaten our contacts, and intimidate witnesses. But every move was documented. Every threat recorded. Every lie exposed. At 9 p.m., I received the final piece. A file Daniel had intercepted. Margaret's own plans to manipulate and defraud her investors, her partners, even her closest aides. Every illegal move, every hidden transaction, every manipulation, it was all there in black and white. I leaned back in my chair, holding my stoneware mug, letting the reality sink in. The storm was almost over. Margaret's empire had been a house of cards, and I held the last card. By midnight, our legal team filed formal complaints and presented the evidence to the authorities. Margaret Hale, untouchable for decades, suddenly found herself cornered. Every action, every attempt to regain control, now strengthened the case against her. And somewhere in the darkness I smiled. Not for revenge, not for power, but for justice. The truth finally would triumph. Tomorrow, the city would wake to a new reality. One where Margaret Hale's empire was no longer invincible, and where the quiet strength of someone underestimated for years would finally be recognized. The morning air was heavy with anticipation. The city didn't yet know what was coming, but the first whispers of Margaret Hale's downfall were spreading like wildfire. I sat in my small office, surrounded by files, photographs, and recordings. My stoneware mug steamed beside me, a quiet comfort amid the chaos. Daniel paced behind me, phone in hand, his brow furrowed. They're calling it the biggest corporate scandal in decades, he said. Every major news outlet has picked it up. Hale's name is trending worldwide. I nodded, feeling a strange calm. The tension had built for months, but now it was reaching its peak. Margaret had fought tooth and nail to maintain control. But her lies and manipulations had finally become her prison. By noon, legal teams swarmed the courts. Margaret's empire was frozen, her assets under investigation. Board members who once feared her were stepping forward with damning testimonies. Investors demanded answers. Her reputation, carefully curated for decades, was crumbling in hours. At 3 p.m., I received a call from one of our insiders, someone who had worked closely with Margaret for years. Their voice trembled. She's panicking. She doesn't know who to trust. People are leaving her. Some of her closest allies have handed over evidence to authorities. She's losing everything. I felt no joy in their fear, only relief that justice was finally in motion. Justice, not revenge. By evening, Margaret Hale appeared again on live television, but this time the confidence was gone. Her carefully rehearsed demeanor faltered. She tried to deny the allegations, but the evidence was undeniable. Charts, emails, recordings, everything contradicted her. "They will see," she whispered to the camera, more to herself than to the audience. "They will see I am not defeated." But the world saw everything. The truth had spoken louder than her lies. At 10 p.m., the final blow landed. Authorities issued a formal arrest warrant for Margaret Hale. Fraud, manipulation, conspiracy. Decades of crimes were catching up. As she was escorted from her office in cuffs, the cameras captured her face, shocked, unrecognizable, vulnerable. The empire she had built with ruthlessness and cunning was gone in a single night. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered in the rain, indifferent to the drama below. But I knew that justice had been served. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "It's over." But the story didn't end there. Because amidst Margaret's fall, new beginnings were taking shape. Clementina was recovering, stronger each day, rebuilding her life with dignity and hope. She had finally found the support and protection she deserved. My relationship with Orion was slowly mending, a cautious bridge being built over months of silence and pain. And I, Zenobia, continued my work, sewing dresses, living honestly, quietly, with a resilience that no scandal, no betrayal, could ever take from me. As I sipped my coffee that night, I realized something important. True power doesn't come from wealth, status, or manipulation. It comes from the strength to stand, to endure, to protect what is right, and to face consequences with courage. Margaret Hale had lost everything, but I had gained clarity, peace, and a new understanding of what it truly meant to be strong. And with that, I knew one truth that would guide me for the rest of my life. Justice, patience, and integrity always outlast greed, cruelty, and deception. The first light of morning streamed through the curtains, soft and golden, illuminating the quiet of my apartment. For the first time in months, the city outside didn't feel heavy with tension or whispers of scandal. It felt like a new beginning. I sat at my sewing table, hands busy with delicate stitches, but my mind wandered to everything that had happened. Margaret Hale was behind bars, her empire dismantled. Clementina was safe, healing, learning to trust again. And Orion, my son, he was finally taking responsibility for his life. I remembered the letter he had sent a few weeks ago. Words of regret, of understanding, of small victories over the mistakes he had made. He was living simply now, working with his hands, attending therapy, learning humility, learning patience, learning to be a man of integrity. And I felt a quiet pride, tempered with sorrow, knowing that sometimes love meant letting go and allowing someone to face the consequences of their choices. The bell above my shop door rang softly. I looked up to see Orion standing there, tentative, unkempt, but with something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years, sincerity. "Mama," he said softly. I nodded. "Hello, Orion." He stepped inside, hesitating, looking at the fabrics, the scissors, the threads. I just wanted to see you. To say thank you for everything. For letting me face my mistakes, for not giving up on me completely." I smiled faintly. "You're learning, that's what matters. Not words, not apologies. Learning to be better every day." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I've been working, trying to rebuild. Slowly, but I'm trying. And I want to make amends. Not just for me, but for the people I hurt." We didn't speak for long. No need. Silence carried more weight than words ever could. I gestured toward the chair near my sewing machine. He sat, watching me work. It felt peaceful. Later, Clementina visited. She had grown so much in these months. Stronger, confident, resilient. We laughed as she helped me thread needles and press fabrics. She didn't need a mother to control her life. She just needed someone to support her, guide her, and care. And that was exactly what I could give. I realized something profound that day. Life wasn't about wealth, status, revenge, or power. Life was about resilience. About standing when everything tried to knock you down. About teaching those around you to stand as well. About love that is brave, honest, and uncompromising in its boundaries. Months passed. Orion continued to rebuild. Clementina thrived. And I I returned to the rhythm of my small, humble life, sewing dresses, tending my shop, drinking coffee in my stoneware mug every morning, feeling gratitude for the simplicity and honesty of my days. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I would think of Margaret Hale, imprisoned and powerless, of Serafina, lost to her ambition, of the mistakes that had nearly destroyed my son. And I understood. Life balances itself. Consequences arrive eventually, and they often carry a strange, silent justice. But more importantly, life heals those who choose to endure, to learn, and to love wisely. I looked out the window one evening, watching the city lights shimmer on the streets. I felt content. Not because I had everything, but because I had integrity, courage, and peace. And sometimes that was enough. Orion knocked softly on my door again that night. He didn't enter. He just stood there, a shadow in the hallway. "Mama," he said, his voice trembling, "thank you for everything. For not giving up on me. Even when I didn't deserve it. I'll keep trying to be someone worthy of your love." I nodded, my heart full. "I know you will, Orion. That's all I could ever hope for." And as he walked away into the night, I closed the door and returned to my sewing, my coffee, and the quiet strength of knowing that I had survived, and that life, no matter how cruel or complicated, could always begin again. Because true strength, true courage, and true love were not about controlling others, gaining wealth, or seeking revenge. They were about integrity, endurance, and the ability to rise, over and over again, no matter how many times life knocked you down. And in that knowledge, I finally found peace.